All right, guys. So we're actually going to start our last unit of ninth grade. This is our geometry unit. Today we're going to be starting to talk about something called rigid transformations. So I'll be going through a couple of examples through the Desmos. You should have started to figure out that we have different ways that we can move and shift shapes around on the coordinate plane. These are called rigid transformations. So a rigid transformation is moving a shape. This could be a point, a line, it could be a shape like a triangle. So it's moving a shape on the coordinate plane, which just means our x and y axis, that does not affect the size. We have some things in geometry. Geometry is a lot about notation. So today we're going to spend some time talking about the way that we write things in geometry. When we're talking about shapes, we have what's called the pre-image, pre meaning before, and then we have the image. Shapes in geometry are labeled, points, lines, and shapes in geometry are labeled by using capital letters. And the thing about these capital letters is that order really does matter. So the pre-image, if we were talking about shape A, B, C, we would label it with a little triangle, since this shape is a triangle, and then we title it A, B, C. This is our pre-image. Now you can see A, B, C has changed a little bit. Maybe it's been flipped and rotated to make image A prime, B prime, C prime. So we would label this one triangle A prime, B prime, C prime. The little tick marks tells us that it's been changed one time. If it had been changed 2 times, it would have 2 tick marks, and we would call this A double prime, B double prime, C double prime. So those little tick marks tell us the number of transformations, and we read it as the word prime. So again, the pre-image has no tick marks because it has not been transformed. The image is like our result, our answer, after it's been transformed. So we read this as A double prime, B double prime, C double prime. In the Desmos, you started to look at different types of transformations. When we talk about rigid transformations, there are 3 kinds that we're going to go over. Today we're going to talk about the first 2. The first one is called a translation. A translation, when you think about translating like language, a sentence in Spanish, we would translate it to English, and it would change languages, but it wouldn't change meaning at all. So that's kind of like with transformations. It might change the location, but it doesn't change the size. It doesn't change the meaning of the shape. A translation is a slide. So for translations, we slide images around, and we can slide those images in 2 directions. We can move them horizontally or vertically. The way that we write rules for translations are we're going to do x plus or minus a number, and then y plus or minus a number. When we add to x, that means we slide right towards the positive. If we subtract from x, that means that we slide left or towards the negatives. For the y values, if we add to y, we are sliding up because that's towards the positives. If we subtract from y, that means that we slide down. So for example, you don't need to write this example down, but if you would like to, you can. If we were given x plus 3, y minus 2, well, this would mean, since I'm adding to x, I go right 3, and this says take y minus 2, I would go right 3 and down 2. So that's our summary of translation. The next type of transformation that we have is called a reflection. A reflection is like a flip. It's when we take a pre-image and we flip it to make our image. If we flip it over the x-axis, that means it goes from top to bottom or bottom to top, or we can flip it over the y-axis. From the Desmos, you should have started to see the pattern that when we flip over the x-axis, our x value doesn't change at all, and our y value becomes negative. So for example, if we had the point 2, 5, to flip that point over the x-axis, the x stays the same, and the y becomes opposite. To flip it over the y-axis, the y stays the same and the x becomes opposite. So this becomes negative x, y. So for example, if we had the point negative 7, negative 3, the x becomes opposite. So the opposite of negative 7 is positive 7, and the y stays the same. This would flip over the y-axis. So this is an image of our notes so far. Next time, we'll come back and we'll talk about what it means to rotate. You can use these notes in your notebook for the rest of the Desmos activity, as well as the cool down.